we get started with today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and it is not to substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. You should always speak with your physician or other healthcare professionals before doing any fasting, changing your diet in any way, taking or adjusting any medications or supplements, or adopting any treatment plan for a health problem. The use of any other products or services purchased by you as a result of this podcast does not create a healthcare provider-patient relationship between you and any of the experts affiliated with this podcast. Any information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. All right, and now we'll get started with today's episode.
Welcome back to another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. This is Terri Lance, and I, of course, am joined by both of my co-hosts, Megan Ramos and Dr. Nadia Pataguana. How are you two doing?
I'm pregnant. I'm tired.
Apparently, maybe not great. I'm coming down with something, as you can probably tell. I'm quieter than usual. Megan's hesitating.
I'm just pregnant. It's a pregnancy symptom day. At least I have less of them these days than I did before.
Oh, God, what a way to start, right? We're usually, Terri, I was listening to our podcast that came out on accountability, and I thought, how annoying that people have to listen to me. I sound like I am so loud and so giddy, and that's like, and today it's like the opposite. So I'm like, great. So all of you that think I'm annoying, today will be a great one.
They get to hear all of our parts. Well, today we wanted to talk about a topic that I hear a lot of confusion about in the community. I see it in the Facebook group. I see it with my clients. And that is when to use consistency, because we talk a lot about consistency, and when to change things up. Because I see a lot of people changing things up every 4 days, every 2 weeks. And I don't just mean, using various fasting, but actually completely abandoning one plan and going to another plan. So I wanted to talk with the two of you today to talk about some of your wisdom about how do people decide how to gauge what to be doing, when to stick with something and when to change it up.
So I've got a couple of recommendations I make either in our community meetings or when I'm working with coaching clients. Give a new protocol 1 month to see how your progress is moving. Sometimes, especially if we've been stuck in a plateau, it can take a couple of weeks to start to get the ball rolling again if we have made changes to our protocol. So give it another couple of weeks and reassess. Know that if you are doing therapeutic fasting, you are moving forwards. It might not be at this huge rapid rate that you want, but you are still moving forwards. We do get stuck. I find when people get into a plateau, it takes about 2 weeks to start to break out of that plateau. So hang in there for a month, be consistent with it. And when people are new to fasting, I also give the same advice. Give every protocol a good 4 weeks, see how it works, reassess. And my rule of thumb is once you give the protocol some time, in 2 weeks, if you're not experiencing the results that you like, and you've talked to somebody about whether or not they're reasonable results, like you're not going to lose 5 pounds or 10 pounds every week, but based on, losing about half a pound of body fat per 36-hour fast, for example, if you're not achieving those expected results, then maybe it's time to change things up again. So see how things look at the end of the month. Are they still stagnant? And then make some changes to your routine.
I'm glad you described it that way, Megan, because I've been describing to a lot of people lately, when I was first learning how to do intermittent fasting with you as my coach, I remember in the beginning, you said, Terri, I think 342s is, a workable plan for you that will give you the results. I said, okay. So first few weeks, I'm doing it religiously and I'm not seeing any changes. Now, I don't remember exactly what the weight change was or anything, but I was not seeing any change. And I was getting a little skeptical and I thought, I don't know why Megan wanted me to do this. Clearly, it's not really doing anything. And then I thought, but it was Megan, and I'm going to do what Megan said. So I kept doing it. And by 10 weeks of doing it, I had lost 22 pounds. So if I had stopped after those first couple of weeks when my body wasn't even yet fully into it, I would have never gotten to see those results. Now, I wouldn't go 5 months of doing it with no results and just say, well, but Megan said. But for me, that's a really important thing to know. Your body's going to take a while to start utilizing this protocol or this plan well, if it's going to work. So be patient early on until you start to see those results.
You guys bring up really good points that trigger a couple of thoughts for me here. One, in our team, Coach Larry, who's lost over 100 and something pounds, lost 2 pounds in the first month of his plan. So, we got to keep our eye on the ball, as I usually say. But really, I think at this point, because we have so much experience working with people, and I was going to say something totally different, but I'll start with that. It's really important that you take advantage of our wisdom, right? I mean, we have a pretty good idea at this point of what kind of therapeutic fasting is going to work for weight loss, for diabetes reversal. So I would say, definitely get in there, get in the community. If you're already in there, look this up, go to meetings, maybe find a coach, because we have a pretty good idea of what's going to work. And so go with that, because here's what one of you guys said something and it triggered a thought, which is we got a lot of people doing OMAD. For example, 1 meal a day, OMAD, the acronym OMAD. And after, they lose about 10 pounds or whatever. And then after 5, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, they're like, oh, this is not working. Intermittent fasting doesn't work for me. Well, OMAD is not something that we usually recommend for weight loss. In fact, OMAD is great, but it's actually not a therapeutic fasting protocol. So it's not one that we use for any sort of healing therapeutic benefit. And so I would say first and foremost, get the help is out there, right? There's lots of resources, recourse for you. So go out there and actually ask the experts, because there's so much chatter on social media about what is and isn't intermittent fasting. Why not take advantage of the fact that there are people out there who actually know what they're talking about? I think that's important. I really like the fact that you guys are bringing this topic up and telling people to really give it some time, particularly because I work with a lot of women, whether they're postmenopausal or premenopausal. So my recommendation is usually, especially if I'm working with premenopausal women, like the group of women trying to conceive or whatnot, is that we have to actually give it a cycle and a half. So it's probably a month and a half, because if you are cyclical, if you're a premenopausal woman who is cyclical or should be cyclical, our hormones, our female reproductive hormones, make it so that you don't lose weight in a linear pattern throughout the month. You lose weight in a cyclical pattern, right? If that's what you're looking for. And even blood sugars are cyclical, right? Your blood sugars get affected by your reproductive hormones. And so there's half of the month where you're going to lose weight more easily, or you're going to have better blood sugars, and the other half where you tend to retain. And even for that, we have some strategies. So I would say if you want to see, for example, weight loss results with a really good weight loss protocol, give it a month and a half, because this first month, you will lose some, but then because of the second half of the month, you may find that there's some retention. But then in the first half of the next month, you're going to actually see what the compound weight loss was of these 2 cycles. So those are my 2 cents there.
Yeah, it's so right about women, and especially those that are cycling, seeing their weight fluctuate and go up and down. Our weight is not linear at all. Actually, we had a relative the other day say, if you weigh yourself 3 times a day, you're going to get 3 different weights. And they're in their 70s. And this was new to them, this concept. So, just kind of like our weight can cycle up and down throughout the day, just because we breathe water, we breathe air, we drink water, we do eat some days. Our weight goes up and then the next morning it comes down. But women at different times of their cycle retain water. So, give a protocol a month and then wait a couple weeks. Are you still in a plateau? And if you're not, then you're not. But, if after you've given it a month and then another 2 weeks, so you're looking at kind of 6 weeks, have things really gotten better? And if they haven't, then, make an effort to change things up. One of the things Terri shared about her journey is during the first couple of weeks, first 2 weeks, nothing moved. And so she decided she was going to have faith in the process and hang in there a bit. But really for the first couple of weeks, especially if you're new to this or new to therapeutic fasting, or so many people are, because Nadia, we see it all of the time on social media. Everyone's doing OMAD thinking that that's therapeutic fasting, and it's not. It actually screws up their metabolism more long term. But we're just so full of insulin, and insulin is there to help protect your body fat. So you got to think of those little insulin molecules as little soldiers that are there guarding all of your fat cells. And you got to eradicate enough soldiers to be able to access your fat cells. And if the army is strong and powerful, it doesn't happen during a fast or a week of fasting. So sometimes it's just a couple of weeks of getting the insulin levels down. And especially as you're learning to navigate your diet. Everyone out there to know, my goal at the start was just to eat healthy once a week because I knew my diet was so poor going into this. Many people set themselves up for really high expectations. I'm never going to eat pizza again, or I'm never going to eat X, Y, or Z again. And then it becomes difficult because perfection's hard to obtain right off the bat. So I knew that wouldn't work. So I tried the opposite strategy. Just give yourself 1 day a week when you have time, cook well and eat well. So for many of us, you might not, that was pretty extreme on the not making changes to your eating side. So different ends of the continuum there. But most of us fall somewhere in the middle where we really try hard to clean up our diets, but we still have these human moments and these navigating moments, right? I think so many people are surprised by even quote unquote real foods and how they affect their glucose levels once they throw on a CGM. So we're constantly, learning how to avoid spiking our insulin levels. So at the start of our journey, we tend to do this more. So, we fast and we lower it, but then we inadvertently, we'll raise it periodically, especially at the start. So you got to give yourself, you can't lose the fat unless you treat the insulin. Fat loss is a side effect of treating hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance. It is a side effect. It is not a root cause in itself. Gaining fat is not the cause here. The insulin resistance is the cause, and that's what needs to be treated first.
I think it's important to, we do talk a lot about consistency and we talk about changing it up. And I get it that for some people, those are, if we hold those two things up side by side, it's confusing. Which should I be doing? And I'm thinking community, the members of the TFM community, the members of the Facebook group, coaching clients who do group coaching, or people who listen to guests on our podcast talk about their journey. What you often hear is people who have really gotten some great results and have really seen significant changes. And so as soon as you hear what they're doing, you change your mind about what you're doing. Oh, well, I just heard someone say that they're doing 266s. Obviously, that's the best plan. I should do that. And so I watch a lot of people who are so eager to learn what to do to help themselves get the results they want, that they're jumping from plan to plan because someone did this. But if you go back and listen to some of these podcast episodes where we've shared people's journeys, they didn't change it up every 2 or 3 weeks, meaning they didn't say, okay, I'm going to do 342s. Oh, never mind. I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm going to do an elimination now. Okay, I'm going to do this now. They kind of stayed the course. Yes, there are some fluctuations in there. But if you go back and listen to Heather Schucker's story, she pretty much did the same type of fasting consistently for months. And there's where the big results came from. So I think it's really easy for us to, in our desire to get the results we want, to hear what someone else is doing and to want to do that. And I really just want to caution people not to jump around too much like that, because you're not getting to see, is this actually working? My example, I thought Megan was kind of crazy because this wasn't working. And then all of a sudden it was working and my pants were getting loose and tops were fitting better and, everything was changing. But I didn't know that early on. And if I had just kept changing my plan, I probably would not have gotten to see those results.
Sometimes the best way is just to let your schedule dictate things too. Some of us have really erratic schedules. I have one coaching client that I work with who has 3 jobs, 2 teenage kids with tons of extracurricular activities. Some days she only has 1 job where it's very easy for her to fast. Some days she has 2 jobs, or some days she goes into all 3 jobs and she's literally out of the house for, 12, 14, 16 hours. It's quite wild. So every week we actually plan her fasting schedule around her work schedule, and she gets a work schedule week by week. And we plan in advance. And right now in the United States, there's a lot of graduation festivities happening. And one of her children has a graduation coming up. And she sent me her schedule this week. Although there was fortunately little work, this lady definitely needs a vacation. But there's tons of grad events. And I said to her, you know what? You've been doing a ton of fasting because your schedule's been so crazy. Enjoy this week. Be thoughtful about what you eat, but use this week to fast less, more 24s, more 16, 18-hour fasts, and use this week as a way to change things up. Sometimes eating more results in a breakthrough. I have another client that we've been working with, and she is a trooper. She has been pushing through with some extended fasting. She absolutely needed to. And we've got her morning blood sugars down from over 200 to in the 100s, which is fantastic. But it's just been a lot. And I think her system is actually acclimating to it being a lot. So we really have pulled back on the fasting protocols the last couple of weeks. And she had stopped losing weight. And now she started losing weight, even though she's fasting a bit less. And it works out for her because she has some unique holidays that have come up for religious reasons. And there's just more eating and celebrations with family. So she's being very thoughtful about what she's eating. She's fasting less, and she's embracing this as a time to change it up. And it's resulted in good fat loss. And her blood sugar levels have stayed in the 100s, 110, which is great progress from where she started just a few months ago. So embracing these particular times, these ebbs and flows that happen throughout the year. In Toronto, when we had the clinic, a lot more people would fast in winter, and they'd fast quite a bit less, or more 24s or 30/16s, in the summertime, because it would be a more social period for them due to the nature of the seasonal climate. So these ebbs and flows, really embrace them. When life is kind of quiet and you can get in a lot of fasting, turn up the dial. And when there's more celebrations, events, travels, still be consistent with some therapeutic strategies. That the one client I mentioned having the grad events this week, we can still do 24s. We can still keep moving forwards, but we can change things up and get these ebbs and flows in without having to be very calculated about it. I think sometimes people try to over-engineer changing up their schedules so much, and then these ebbs and flows still happen to them in many cases, which further complicates things. So if they've decided, okay, this is a week where I'm going to do therapeutic fasting because this is how I've engineered my calendar, but then they've got grad events and whatnot this week, they might not be able to adhere to it. They might be feeling bad and guilty for not being able to adhere to it. They might make some eating choices as a result of that guilt. So really kind of setting up your schedule week by week is another great way to make sure you're doing something you can feasibly stick to, and that you're fitting fasting into your lifestyle. And that way you're going to get some natural variations that change up your schedule.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because this is something that we talk a lot about in our meetings. The idea of being consistent, but yet flexible, because you have to be flexible and you have to learn how to pivot, because life gets in the way in good ways, right? There's holidays, there's grad events. And so being consistent doesn't necessarily mean doing the exact same thing week after week. There are ways to be flexible and to pivot. And again, this is where, our experience and some of the examples that we can share with people come in, because you can still consistently be working towards lowering insulin to reverse insulin resistance and reverse all of the conditions that you just mentioned, while being flexible and being able to pivot for these events and whatnot. And the other thing that I talk quite a bit about is actually knowing how to implement a really good holding pattern for certain weeks that you can't be doing therapeutic fasting. Most importantly, during those weeks, you want to know how to hold on to your gains, right? How to not lose all the progress that you've made. And this can often happen, especially when stressful times or vacations come in. So you can still be consistent in your journey, but be flexible. And you have to be, like you said, because life will get in the way. So you have to learn early on how to be flexible.
I usually try to give my clients a fasting plan A, B, and C. And every week they can look at their schedule and see how to fit it in. So plan A might be 3 24-hour fasts. And they can look and see. Maybe they do 2 back-to-back, or maybe they do all 3 back-to-back. Say going into a holiday weekend, they clear out their fasting at the beginning of the week. Maybe they do them Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But they have a plan A. Then a plan B is a little bit more intense, and a plan C is, increases the intensity and turns that fasting dial right up. And then when they go to look at their calendar every week, they can see how they can put it in. Some people definitely have a lot more complicated schedules. So in coaching, we'll work with them more closely and tailor it to the complexity of their schedules. But I think having plans, like not a plan, but plans, helps. So I had some basic rules for myself during my journey. I did a minimum of 3 24s a week. If I really, for whatever reason, was too sick, or just things, it was like a Christmas to New Year's kind of situation where there was multiple celebrations, then I would do my TRE, my 16-8, 2 meals a day, strategy. But for fasting, I did 3 24s, or I would do 3 42s, and I could do a combination thereof. So, if at the end of the week I didn't feel like doing a third 42, I could sub in a 24. Having those rules, minimum 3 24s, maximum 3 42s, and you can do any combination thereof depending on how you feel, stress, sleep, other life circumstances, maybe you're jet lagged, who knows. And having that flexibility is what really enables consistency, and it creates some natural variation week by week anyway.
Well, I'm so glad we got a chance to talk about this topic. Obviously, it's something we have ongoing conversations about, so I hope everyone benefited from this. And I wanted to make a recommendation that if you have anyone in your family or friend that you think would benefit from listening to this, please share this episode with them. We'd love to hear this being spread to other people. So thank you all for listening today, and we look forward to coming back to you in another episode.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Happy fasting.